Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our Knowledge at Noon talk for the month of May. We're sorry we started a little tardy. We've been having some issues with Eventbrite today. But my name is Gisela Miranda, and I am the interim arts manager at Yolo Arts. And just a reminder that as you join, please mute your microphone and video so we can ensure a smooth streaming experience for everyone. Knowledge at Noon is a free monthly speaker series featuring artists, historians, and agricultural professionals that explore themes central to Yolo Arts and Yolo County Historical Collection exhibitions at the Gibson House and Property. Before we get started today, I'm going to pass the mic over to our creative director, Janice Purnell, and she has a few announcements for everyone.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of the wonderful women of Women in Leadership Davis for collaborating with Yolo Arts on this incredible exhibit, Art in Action. I'm bringing their exhibit to the Barn Gallery. It was a pleasure working with all of you. And I'm sure Zokare will be sharing the story of how you all rallied local artists and activists last year to create this work honoring African-American women heroes. I'm so glad it found its way to the Barn Gallery, where we have the privilege of seeing all the work up under one roof and sharing the stories of these women, as well as the mission of your organization. If you haven't had a chance to see the show, it is up for 5 more weeks. And I have to say that even during the pandemic, we have had a small but very steady stream of visitors of all ages coming to the gallery, parents bringing their children, college students, older couples, friends meeting friends, you name it. And everyone walks away extremely moved by what they're seeing and what they're reading. Some even stay afterwards and ask questions, or they say, wow, I didn't know about this person, or I didn't realize that that's what happened. You know, it's really been generating important conversations and awareness, and it's just gratifying to see firsthand the power of the arts, you know, to change the world one person at a time. So I'm really glad that we're continuing this process of learning and engagement today. And I just thank you all so much for being here. One last thing, we are planning an in-person closing reception and Juneteenth celebration at the Barn Gallery and Gibson House property, which will be on June 19th. And I just heard today that we will be having a DJ. So we're going to have some music and it's going to be a great celebration. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. And today's talk is very special because we have more than one guest. We have 3. So it'll be a roundtable discussion moderated by me. And for those who just joined, just a reminder that I'm Drusella and I am the education manager at Yolo Arts. And so I'm going to let all of our guests today introduce themselves after watching a short clip that is a part of our Art in Action gallery. So I will go ahead and get that started for you all. because our discussion is in tangent with that exhibit, that's why we decided to show that clip. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to our speakers to introduce themselves. So up first is Zachariah.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. And thank you to Yolo Arts for hosting this really important exhibit and conversation. My name is Zachariah Minya. I am the current co-founder of WILD, and it stands for Women in Leadership Davis. We are a group of women who wanted to do more after the protest. So, we are seeking to further the discussions about police brutality, about injustice, systemic racism, and also economic change and how to, what to do next beyond the protests is our focus. Our focus is BIPOC young women. We want to mentor young African-American women and other young women of color who would otherwise not have opportunities to excel in their careers and to give guidance and mentorship. So if that sounds like something that you would love to enjoy, would love to be a part of, please reach out. I'm also a business owner with my husband. We own Zim Cuisine in town, which is an African soul food restaurant. You can find us at the farmer's market on Saturday morning or on our website. I'm also the current president of PACS, Parents of African American Children in Davis, which is a group that really wants to bring African American children together so that there is some kind of normalcy. We found that in Davis, it's not as diverse as people would imagine, and our children just wanted to see, faces of other children and interact with children that look like them, and give a safe space for African American parents to ask questions and get resources. And so as long as you're a parent of an African American child, it's the only prerequisite you are allowed and welcome to join. And I also have a foundation called Tessa Foundation, and we sponsor young brown girls to go to school. We have a program, in collaboration with WILD here in the US, and also a program in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Up next to introduce herself is Francesca.
Thanks for having us here on this really important topic about how art and activism blend and support one another. I'm one of the founders of Yolo People Power, and Yolo People Power was born out of civil rights. It was born out of ACLU of Northern California, calling for people to understand what their local police were doing. And our Davis chapter started pulling one string and then another string and then another string. And so now we're focused on YOLO with partners from throughout the county, because we understand how criminal justice is not a strictly municipal issue. It involves all these systems of incarceration. So we imagine a world without incarceration, a world where those people who've suffered trauma have access to resources and love and support and community and mental health and behavioral health. And so we're working on a number of different campaigns, which I'll talk about later on. And I'm also a member of WILD, which in this last year has really become an affinity group of women who aspire for change. And I think we're discovering that being authentic in community is part of the change process. And I'm really delighted to be in this conversation, because I think art helps us find that universal human connection, not just the intellectual, wonky policy mind, which is where I've lived a lot of my life. So I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And our third guest today is one of the artists in the exhibition. Anya, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Anya McCann. I've been living in Davis about, 11 years, and I am an activist. and I'm an artist, and I really appreciate that this year, especially with Wild and the marches that have gone on and the call for art, I was able to sort of join those two parts of me in a different way than I have in a long time. I work. I'm an advocate for food justice, animal justice with Cool Cuisine. I volunteer with Cool Davis, which is environmental advocacy. I've served as a commissioner on the Natural Resources Commission for Davis, working on environmental issues. And right now I serve on the board of NAMI Yolo, as well as the neighborhood court. So those are activities that that are meaningful to me. And you'll see one of the on the screen, the thing that on the upper left-hand corner is a mural that we just finished. It was a piece of street art trying to encourage people for Earth Day to eat more plants and eat a rainbow every day as a way to heal the planet. In 2 weeks, I'll be working on NAMI Hope Chalks, which we're doing instead of our annual walkathon. But the ones on the bottom, I really focus, most of my art career has been focused on portraits. So painting faces is very engaging for me and makes me feel connected to my subject. I think it's what we needed to do this year after with the elections and with the discussion around police is to kind of create a new narrative. And I think that art allows us to do that in a really important way. It changes how people's brains are looking at things. And in my career, I'm a marketing professional, and my career is about figuring out how to present information in different ways that convince people to like something. So that can be done through written messages, but I think art is particularly impactful because it stimulates our emotions. And what we've been seeing for the last, especially the last couple of years, is these repetitive negative images that we're seeing on our television screens and in our newspapers. And it's very hard, like I grew up watching television that was almost entirely white when I was a kid. And the only way that we start changing things is by actively changing them. So as you see more commercials on television that are more multiracial, that show BIPOC communities, as you see casts changing on television, I mean, it's really slow, but having a place where we can, people have to be able to see these things. So the fact that Zachariah, created this march, that it was an opportunity to have people show up and see things and to share it in this wonderful art exhibit that Yolo Arts has put up. So we can create this art, but people have to be able to see it. It has to get media coverage. It has to be in exhibits or in large public spaces where people can stumble across it. So I appreciate all the opportunities that have come up this year for me to share the things that are on my mind and get emotion out of me and onto paper.
Thank you so much for your introductions. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the questions. And just a reminder, if anyone has any questions they would like to add, go ahead and insert it into the chat box and I will compile them and ask them at the end. So the first question is, what is WILD, Women in Leadership Davis, and what do they do?
I think I shared a little bit about it in my intro. Again, Women in Leadership Davis is a group of women that want to further the discussion on racial injustice. I think we formed right after the George Floyd murder that we all watched on live TV. And our first march that we planned together with PACT, which is Parents of African American Children, which I'm also part of and leading, was for our fathers, for our sons, for our brothers, because we wanted to humanize the lives that are being lost right in front of us. That this conversation should not be about, you know, we should humanize his life. It should be, he's a father, he's a son, he's a brother, above anything else. And we wanted to focus on that. And then fast forward, you know, we wanted to specifically have a march for our mothers, for our daughters, for our sisters, because we wanted a march that really humanized the women, African-American women, either in leadership, that have done amazing things in their lives, and also victims of police brutality, and how that intersects. A lot of people don't think about how that intersects. And we also wanted, you know, some visual aid to the march, because we marched over the overpass in South Davis. And I just had this idea of, what if we put art all over that fence? Just as people marched, it was just more than a march. It was a time to reflect and humanize on these faces. And so we just were really excited that Anya and all the other artists that are listed on the website were able to participate. And so Wild also has a leadership program that we had happened, you know, we've brainstormed for over a year. And because of COVID, we only kind of had a soft launch. You'll hear more about it in the next couple of months. Our focus is BIPOC, so Black and Brown, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC girls, young women. And it's a mentorship program where we have, you know, 12 to 16-year-olds mentored by, you know, 17 to 20-year-olds who are also mentored by 20 to 27-year-olds who are then mentored by the next group. So it's just a multi-generational leadership academy to bring particularly African-American girls into the spotlight, into positions that they would normally not have, into relationships and connections that would help equalize the balance, so as to say.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I know that you, and this question can be for all of you, that you were talking about the connections between like activism and humanizing Black lives and uplifting like women leaders. And I know that Anya had talked about the importance of like having art, having a message, but having it have a platform to be seen. So can someone go ahead and touch upon how the idea for Art in Action as a gallery exhibit came about?
Well, before it was a gallery exhibit, it was an overpass exhibit. And after it was an overpass exhibit, it was a kind of pop-up exhibit in different businesses in Davis. And I had it was so sweet. I was like an honor to be in front of these portraits that connected me to the artists, that connected me to those that were being drawn, and connected me to people on the street. So we were masked, and people were walking down the street, and people would look at a picture. Little children would look at a picture, and we would have to find a way to tell a story to a child, a story of a young Black woman wearing her cap and gown, who was a mother, a daughter, and who died in front of her children and her mother and her brother when she was having a mental health breakdown. And she was asphyxiated in the back of the police car. We would be another portrait, and it was this dynamic trans woman who was spunky and colorful, and yet it came with the story as well. And the story of someone who didn't let other people get her down, despite being in a population that is the most targeted by violence. So it was a combination of the visual interaction, but then the processing together in community spaces. And I think your exhibit, and I hope those that are participating that haven't seen the exhibit, get yourself over there and plan on June 19th, because we can dance together and see it all together, because as you witness face after face, and I think everybody has used this word, humanity, how it creates the connections we feel with one another.
Mhm.
It was pretty interesting to go walk around during the downtown Davis, pop-up, and it was there for a while. I don't know how many, 2 weeks, and I would go kind of loop around, and every block you would see people standing in front of them and looking and wondering, what is that, and having a discussion, and that was like the gold star on on the whole effort, was generating discussion.
Definitely. I remember walking around downtown Davis and seeing all the really beautiful and powerful pieces that you're all speaking to. And I know that in the video that I first showed, it showed the variety of pieces in the exhibit at this moment. And I just want to give a shout out to the UC Davis Department of Design for contributing that those little books that you saw on the pedestals. They're handmade, and they're obviously inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement. And I know that when I was just watching the video, I was getting really like emotional, and I was feeling that connection to our humanity, because people are suffering and are being targeted, and what does that mean? And so I was wondering if y'all could go ahead and talk about how does art and activism interact, and how does it overlap, especially since art can be such a powerful tool of communication.
And just thinking about even the visual art of that video, I mean, whoever put that video together, it's an amazing 4 minutes. I was almost just teary-eyed because it's an emotional thing. We're like a year past, a year after George Floyd was murdered, and they could have, and they did, try to dehumanize them even just now during the trial. And many times you found people of color posting that George Floyd is not on trial. And we please remember that. And so when we use art to change the narrative, again, one of the biggest struggles I've ever had is just humanizing Black lives. Just see me as Dokirai, see the diversity that we have in our community, but at the end of the day, just see me as a mom. Our moms in Yolo County are, very united in terms of really connect with something, with local people, local vegetables, local everything. And when we start seeing just people of colors even being local, it's a whole other conversation, then we really change the narrative of this system needs to change. It's not just, oh, let's protest this one murder. It's this whole system needs to change. And I think the thing that art does, it just humanizes people so that you see the person. I'm always thoughtful of Sandra Bland, particularly because she reminded me a lot of me. You'd think like if you're an activist, then you have some sort of safety, but no one is safe. No one is safe. And we should get to the point of, if one thing affects a certain part of our society, of our community, then it affects us all. And until we as a country, as a world, start to see all lives as human and equally important, then we're a long way away from change. And art does help with that. If you go to the exhibit at the Yolo Arts Barn, you can just walk and take time to reflect on all of these pictures and imagine all these victims of police brutality, what they could have done with their lives. Like somebody like Sandra Bland, she would have been one of the people we're talking about now as activists, for their lives were cut short before they could even be activists. Then we look at the activists. They could have been victims themselves too. So there's a huge intersection there, and art is a powerful tool that we really don't use enough. And I can let the other women, add on to that.
It's hard to add on to that, Zoki. I remember being a high school student, loving art, but feeling it was frivolous. It didn't it didn't create change. I had to decide whether to be an art major or to be a social scientist. And I chose the latter. Actually, I had another loop in there where I also was an early childhood educator. But it wasn't until I saw the art of other countries. When I saw the art of Latin America and I saw the murals and I saw the statements, I was like, why didn't they show me that when I was in high school? I didn't see it then. I saw European classical art. I didn't see people's art. And I think activism is people's art. And it's, it often doesn't make, their art often doesn't make it on walls mounted beautifully with gilded frames. But hey, I'll tell you, Yolo People Power's reach has been expanded since we've been having people create graphic arts to tell the story. In the exhibit, there are these amazing silk screens of Black people who've been killed by police that have been created by a Latino cooperative out of Woodland, who, if nothing else, just go. These people show up at these marches and give away their posters that should be framed in gilded frames. Tana, thank you for adding that. I appreciate that. I'm sorry I didn't have her name. But where the intersection, besides the humanity, is a cause, it's a vision, it's showing something that is spotlighted, it's framed as important. And often in words, we struggle with framing what is important. And as we think of movements, to be able to imagine and to touch into what is precious and what is needing to be changed, and to do it visually, we can engage people in a so much deeper way than a cerebral word way.
I also forgot to include that it changes the narrative too, right? They pictured all these victims of police brutality, in a jumpsuit, doing something, the worst possible picture that they could put out. The media has been used to put that out. And when you change the narrative and draw an art picture, for example, of them in their graduation uniform, then that also changes the narrative.
I think that's what drew me to the call to art, was the opportunity to show positive pictures of people that had power or had, some kind of something that we all connected to. And the first people that I chose were people who were known in history, and who were either have been positioned for us as heroes, but we don't really know, I don't really know very much about the background of Rosa Parks and what a lifelong activist she was until I started doing a little bit of research. And then more recently, one thing that we haven't talked about is in Davis, we have this thing called the Solidarity Space, which is in our Central Park, and it's the location where we've been able to hold a lot of our public events and public events that are either memorializing people or protesting. It's a nice public area, and on the day of the George Floyd, what do you call it? The wrapping up of the case, the verdict. Somebody removed all of the protest art that was there. And so I really felt like immediately, I didn't have a lot of free time, but I felt like immediately I needed to contribute to replacing that, because our art has to be stronger than somebody doing something like that. And we have to show that if you take it away, we're just going to come back. We're still here. We're going to continue to be here. And these messages are not going to die because you tore up some art or threw it away. We can create new art. It's always in our power to do that.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your comments. As a artist and activist myself, and actually somebody who used to work at Tana to teach political silkscreening. I that was the manager there before. So I mean, I absolutely resonate with everything that you're saying about how art can be a real medium to, you know, uplift voices, especially marginalized voices, in which I know that this particular exhibit really wanted to uplift Black and African American women. So can you all comment on how women have paved the way, particularly in social justice movements? And, you know, what does it even mean to be a woman in leadership in community?
That's a big question. As a white woman, I really seek out authors who are women of color, who tell me their story and help me see beyond my white lens. I feel that when we listen to groups, to people who have been perceived as being part of a group that maybe have been previously unseen, it's no more. I mean, I just feel like we have so many awesome Black women and other women of color who are speaking out and giving language to the oppressions that we might be in ways complicit with. I'll pass the mic.
I would speak to it as in what is like my experience as being an African female leader. It is challenging, to tell you the truth. In many ways this year, there's been a shift in people actually asking for Black opinions about Black lives. So I definitely see some progress that's been, you know, long coming. But I also see how, you know, how much less conversation there is now versus the first half of this past year. I see those conversations dwindling. And my biggest fear and worry is what African American communities have worried about, is that it's no longer news as much, you know, like I can even give you an example of the first protest we did right after George Floyd. We had, you know, I would say 5,000 people, you know, show up in this small town. And then by the time we did the protest for the women, it had completely gone down. Now there was COVID and everything else. But the biggest worry is that our lives are not constantly in discussion. Like, we can afford to be news that's, you know, in the past tense, if I can say. So the biggest worry is, how do we connect the two communities, the people that are living in the trauma and experiencing it every single day, like I am, and then try to lead those people into, and people that aren't living in this trauma and that can afford to have it as a conversation or not and still live their lives. How do we bring these two communities together to where the people that have experienced the trauma can still bring room to say, yes, there could be change, but they're not believing it. And the people that, you know, have slowly come to see, like, hey, there's a huge problem and we're just waking up to it. How do we bridge these two communities together? And in many ways, it feels like you're dealing with two completely different communities. So it is a challenge. It's a challenge to lead when you yourself are being affected by the trauma. And you have to almost take yourself out of it and give that opportunity for the movement to come. So I do think there's been a shift this year, for sure. But I also think there's a lot of room for this movement to grow still. And I think more than anything, African American and African women are still suffering from that second glass ceiling of, you know, now that people have slowly integrated us into the conversation, there's still not enough leaders. There's not enough African-American women at the decision-making table. And that's my biggest pet peeve. I'm always talking about this, is that we can talk about Black lives, but until African-American women are on the boards for your nonprofits, or on, the downtown Davis, the Yolo County Board of Supervisors, until we have representation in places that matter, the change is going to come very, very slowly. And so, it's a complicated and very slow moving process, but I'm just, still hoping that we're going to see a big difference. And I'm already seeing it. Like, we're seeing more and more people asking opinions of Black women, but what I don't see yet is seeing Black women in positions on the table, decision-making tables for everything. And I would love to see more of that.
I would hope that everybody on this call could be inspired that, I think that one of the biggest lessons that I learned from both of my parents is, in terms of activism, is it only takes one person to change the world. One person. Don't underestimate your power as one person to put up a sign on a wall that thousands of people see, or to run for a position that's a leadership position, where then you actually have power on the books, whether you're a commissioner or you're a leading a group. Start a group yourself. I've seen several of the people on this call do that. They see a room for change and they take the power into their hands and say, I'm going to do something about this. You have free tools at your disposal with social media these days, which makes it a lot easier to communicate with people, and then to harness that power for something that gets us more into elected positions where we have more power in the wider world. But we can have a lot of power right here within our own communities, and with educating our children to become different people with a different outlook and a different goal of how the world should run.
I'd like to add one more thing, and it's relational, and it's thinking like an anti-racist, and just keep challenging yourself about that, and understand reparations. And that word is one that I'm still learning to understand, but part of it is being in relationship with the Black community, and Black individuals and brown individuals and Asian individuals, and whatever you are, with those that are not looking like you, whatever they are, and to really build relationship. And I think that's one of the beauties of what Wild has done in this past year. Having COVID and not being able to go out and start all these youth programs has given us a time to stand with each other in the crises that people go through. And it seems to me, the more pigment you have, the more crises in this country are coming at you in obvious and some more subtle ways. And having friends, I felt their little and big challenges, and I just think we have to show up for each other, both in group mobilization and activism, but in very simple little ways. Asking the homeless person, what do you need? Asking people, what do you need? What do you think? Don't assume you know, because you're not going to know it all. And I just, with being, I think I'm tying together this thought of that, how art brings human, but relationship brings human. And then of course, the third is organize. When you see a system that's broken, then you have to work to fix it. And you have to, and even if your job personally isn't to be the organizer, your job is to look at it, let it in, feel the pain, have a conversation, ask a question, because as each of us as individuals have conversations with others in our neighborhood, our community, I think it's our responsibility to change broken systems. And that happens by changing minds and hearts.
And there's a lot of organizations in our community that are looking for people to come on and step into leadership roles. There's a lot of boards that are actively thinking through, you know, we have a whole bunch, like all white men on our board, or we have all, you know, white women on our board. On our NAMI board, we struggle because it's a lot of volunteers that just like all we're just trying to do is make it through the day, right? But we realize we need Spanish speakers. We need people of color. There's a lot of communities that we're not able to reach out to. So, but we're not the only board. I'm hearing everybody I know who sits on a board of an organization is saying the same thing right now. So if you have an interest, something you're interested in, like step up to the plate and give a year to an organization to give them some perspective, because people want the perspective now. That's what's come out of the last few years, is that people are asking the questions now, which has not been, I don't think, until the last couple of years.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So we're going to start wrapping up the conversation soon. So if any of our audience members today have any questions, now is the time to put it in the chat. I did want to just like touch upon like all the different points that everyone has made. And I think that, you know, yeah, there's definitely a shift. And all shifts and all changes, all transitions are really, I would say that they're just comforting, you know, like it's different and you have to get used to it, and it's not easy all the time. And I think that, like, yes, more people are asking and seeking, women of color, disabled folks, you know, people with various marginalized identities, right? And so and I think that I want to like really emphasize Anya's point about like, right, the change really can begin with one person, and that really always begins with yourself, because you can have a Black woman on the board and you can ask her, but can you listen? And can you actually listen and put that into action? Like the art exhibit is art in action. So it's one thing to say and do and to like visually look at the part, but it's another thing to like be the part, to be the active change, because it is rocking the boat, right? It is difficult conversations. And I very much appreciate all of you here today to talk about this huge topic that our whole nation is really reckoning with right now. And so as we kind of are wrapping up, especially with like the really important work that you're all doing as, you know, active community members. I know Zachariah and Francesca, you're part of WILD. And can you also talk a little bit, Francesca, about the mission of Yolo People Power and how people can get involved with that?
Yolo People Power. Well, we have a Facebook page. There's a slide that shows we're on Twitter and Instagram. And Morgan, who's on the call, I think is on Twitter and Instagram, because that's beyond me. But we'll have our monthly meeting this coming Sunday at 2 p.m. So if you just email the email at the last slide, we'll invite you to the meeting. We're a group that is, when you ask for the mission has kind of swelled in different directions with who shows up. We really want to listen to you. We really want people to raise their voices, share their ideas, share their talents, support one another. So we are having this Saturday, there will be a teach-in at 1 at Central Park. On Sunday at 2, we'll have our general meeting. And on the end of the month, the last Saturday of the month, 29th, we're going to have a march from the Davis Art Center down to City Hall. And it's really art to action. So there'll be sign making at the Art Center. We are marching down to City Hall because, as some of you may have heard, Davis has 3 commissions that unanimously came up with 9 recommendations for making our town a safer town for all people. The first one really had to do with racism. We've got to address racism in our systems. We have to explicitly address it. It has to be included in personnel reviews. It has to be included in hiring. It needs to be overt and exclusive. The city hasn't done that. The commission said yes, 3 commissions, the police accountability commissions, the social services commissions, the human relations commissions, and the city is being very slow to take any action. There's a lack of courage, there's a lack of vision, there's a lack of leadership. So when you don't have that, I mean, you can vote people out, and that is something that happens in our democratic process, but you can also inspire them to be bolder. And so this march is to inspire them to, we're calling Time for the 9 recommendations. It's time to step up and be a part of it. Several people have been, okay, Drusella, you asked me to talk about where my passion is. I'm talking, I'll be quiet. There's notes in the chat.
Yes, there is the Yolo People Power email as well as their Facebook group. So please get connected with them if that speaks to you. But I just wanted to let each of our guest speakers today just give their closing comments really quickly. And then like Francesca has already alluded to, there's a lot of events coming up. So we're gonna end with a bunch of different ways you can get involved. So Zachariah, do you wanna go ahead and give your closing statements?
Sure. I mean, I want to thank everyone just for even coming, and just the biggest change is to continue the conversation and for it to continue to be relevant and to constantly be a daily reminder that we have a long way to go. I know it seems exciting that, the conversations are starting, but we, if you think about 100+ years of trauma and people that have just gotten to wake up to something, in the last couple months, there's a big gap there. So my encouragement is continue to ask questions about decisions that are being made, and is there diversity in whatever decision-making entity you're a part of, that you're involved in. Continue to make sure that there is some diversity in whatever decision-making table you're sitting on. And as a mom, I'm always encouraging people to make sure their children are included in their own diversity training. We make sure our marches are kid-friendly. We want the kids to show up. We want the kids to protest. So you saw in the video, lots of kids are protesting. If you go in the Yolo Arts Barn, you'll see my daughter, shouting on the mic in Black Lives Matter. And we wanted to always be part of the conversation. We always want the next generation to do better than us. So please, if Wild is always looking for mentors. So if you feel like you would love to mentor some BIPOC young women, please reach out. It's wildevents davis@gmail.com. And you can, Gisela, if you can type in our email in there in the chat. And we also are on Facebook. You can like Wild Events Davis as a Facebook page. And also on Instagram. And so we just really want people to partner with us and continue the conversation. And I think Janice mentioned that we have a closing reception on June 19th, and that's also Juneteenth. It's a very significant day for the African-American community, and hope it will be for everyone. And so, yeah, we hope to see everyone in town and as we continue the conversation together. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Francesca, you wanna go ahead and give your closing statements?
I think I already did.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I love the passion though, I love it. So hopefully people will get to see more of that and educate themselves on the work that you're doing in Davis. Anya, would you like to give your closing statements?
Sure. I want to thank Women in Leadership Davis for, and Yolo People Power and Yolo Arts, and for giving me an opportunity to have a channel for me to provide something that helps in this conversation. I'm a white woman, and I'm an ally, and but it's hard to always find the best ways to participate in a way that has, I have very limited time in my schedule. So I try to find the things where I can have the most bang for my buck. And I think that this was a really superior effort what you put together, and I really appreciate you allowing me and inviting me to participate.
Yes, thank you again so much. I feel like this was a really inspirational and insightful conversation between all three of you. And my little 2 cents here and there, moderating the conversation. So I'm gonna go ahead and go straight into our announcements. So this Saturday for Yolo Arts, we're actually having a palette knife painting demo on Zoom. You can check out our website for more information. We have so much. And then we also have our closing reception for our emerging artists show, which is going to be Thursday, May 27th. This is our first in-person event since, last year when everything went down. So we will be, following safety protocol as per CDC. So face coverings will be required. There'll be plenty of ventilation as it's an indoor and outdoor event, and face covering is still required. There's also the new reception for our first Friday, the hot and cold of it at Gallery 625 on Friday, June 4th. And like I said, you can find all this information at yoloarts.org. And then there is also the Yolo People Power event that Francesca was talking about, which is shifting public safety dollars. The teach-in is happening May 15th. And you will begin at Davis Central Park, and then there will be a bike parade from 1 to 3. And then there's also the March to Fund a Safer Davis, which is happening Saturday, May 29th. And then as we had mentioned several times today, Juneteenth is June 19th, and it is a huge day of importance to the African-American community here in the US. And it is also the closing reception for Art in Action. So if you haven't gotten a chance to see it in person, we encourage you to come. It'll be from 12:30 to 3 at the Barn Gallery. And then as Anya had mentioned, she is a part of NAMI, and the Hope Chalks will be May 22nd. And also, if you're interested in learning more about any of the people and the organizations that they're a part of, go ahead and follow them on social media at Women in Leadership Davis, as well as at Yolo People Power. And of course, yoloarts.org and our Instagram and Facebook. We just wanted to give a big thank you to everybody today and our audience members. And we hope that you will join us next time for our next Knowledge at Noon talk, which is every second Wednesday. And you can find us on Eventbrite, just follow us on social media. But thank you all so much again. And I hope you have a wonderful day.